The bones snapped between her teeth, dry and brittle. Eliza Turner scraped the last threads of charred meat from the rabbit's femur, crouched beside the dying embers of her meager fire. Her stomach twisted with hunger, despite the meal the first in 3 days. At 12 years old, she had never known such gnawing emptiness, never felt the desert's merciless embrace. Around her, the high desert wind picked up, carrying sand that stung her raw, sunburnt skin. The grit embedded itself in her matted blonde hair, which hung in tangles around her gaunt face. She wore her father's oversized shirt, now torn and filthy, belted with a piece of rope around her thin waist. Her feet were bare-cracked and bleeding from days of walking across the unrelenting terrain. The distant howl of coyotes made her stiffen. They were getting closer tonight. She clutched the small knife she had salvaged from the wreckage, all that remained of her family's possessions. The blade was dull, hardly useful for defense, but she gripped it until her knuckles blanched. As darkness fell completely, she added the last scraps of tumbleweed to the fire, producing a feeble flame that threw shadows against the rock face behind her. The sandstone overhang was her only shelter, but at least it blocked the wind from one direction. In the blurred distance, something moved. Eliza froze her breath, caught in her throat. A tall figure stood motionless on the ridgeline, a man with a feathered war bonnet, his silhouette stark against the violet sky. An Apache warrior, arms folded across his chest, watching her. How long had he been there? How long had he? The knife trembled in her hand. Run, hide, fight? She had no strength for any of these options. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Mother had always said crying wouldn't solve a thing, and Mother had been right about everything until the day she died screaming. The warrior remained still, observing, waiting, for what Eliza couldn't imagine. But in that moment, as their gazes locked across the darkening desert, she knew with terrible certainty that her life hung in perfect balance between survival and oblivion. 2 weeks earlier, the Turner family wagon had rolled steadily along the Santa Fe Trail. James Turner, a stonemason from Missouri, had been promised good work and better pay in the booming territories. His wife, Martha, had packed their modest belongings, and Eliza had been allowed to bring her most prized possession, a small porcelain doll with painted blue eyes that matched her own. "We'll have a proper house by Christmas." Father had promised, his eyes crinkling at the edges as he smiled. No more drafty cabin winters. The Southwest needs builders, and they pay in gold. Mother had been less enthusiastic about the journey. "It's wild country, James. Lawless. The newspapers are full of stories." As she spoke, she'd absently fingered a small gold locket that hung around her neck, a habit Eliza had noticed whenever Mother was anxious or lost in thought. One night, Eliza had awakened to find her mother sitting alone by the fire. The locket open in her palm, tears silently trailing down her cheeks. "Mother," Eliza had whispered, crawling from their bedroll. Martha had startled, quickly closing the locket. "You should be sleeping, sweetheart. Are those pictures of grandfather and grandmother?" A shadow had crossed her mother's face. "No, just people I once knew." She'd tucked a strand of hair behind Eliza's ear. "People who wanted different things for me than I wanted for myself. Like what? They wanted me to be someone I wasn't." Her mother's voice had grown distant. "Sometimes, Eliza, the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between what others expect of you and what your heart knows is true." Before Eliza could ask more, Mother had guided her back to bed. The next morning, the locket was once again hidden beneath Mother's high-collared dress, and the moment was never mentioned again. "Your mother worries too much," Father had whispered to Eliza one evening as Mother dozed beside the campfire. But there was a time she knew finer things than our humble cabin. Her family back east had means once, I reckon. Never talks about it, though some kind of falling out before we met. They had traveled with a larger wagon train initially, But when a broken axle delayed them, James made the fateful decision to continue alone rather than wait for repairs. "We'll catch up in a day or two," he had assured the wagon master. The trail's well marked from here. The second night on their own, camped near a dry riverbed, Eliza had been awakened by her father's urgent whisper. "Get down. Stay quiet," he hissed, reaching for his rifle. Through a crack in the wagon canvas, she saw them 5 riders approaching in the moonlight, bandanas pulled up over their faces. Just passing travelers. The lead man called out, his voice carrying a strange lilt. "Our horses need water." "There's no water here," Father answered, stepping out with his rifle held low but ready. Riverbed's been dry for months. What happened next came in flashes of violence that would burn forever in Eliza's memory. The crack of gunshots, mother's scream, father falling, the men ransacking their wagon arguing over their meager possessions. The girl, one said, grabbing her arm as she tried to crawl away. She noticed a strange tattoo on his hand, a snake coiled around a cross. Fairchild in Santa Fe will pay good money for this one. Blonde hair fetches premium. The name Fairchild had made Mother gasp in her final moments. "Not him." She choked out, blood bubbling at her lips. "Eliza, run. He leaves some for the buzzards." Another man laughed, striking a match against his boot. The flame caught the wagon canvas quickly. In the chaos that followed the roar of fire, the panicked horses, the men shouting, Eliza had managed to slip away into the darkness, a knife clutched in her hand, terror propelling her bare feet over sharp rocks and cacti. Behind her, the wagon became an inferno, consuming everything she had ever known. For days afterward, she wandered in a daze. The desert was relentless, blazing hot, by day freezing at night. She dug for water in dry creek beds, ate cactus pulp that made her stomach cramp, and once caught a small lizard that she devoured raw, gagging but desperate. Her fair skin blistered under the relentless sun. Her lips cracked and bled. Each step left bloody footprints as the soles of her feet split open on the rocky ground. Twice she saw distant riders and hid trembling until they passed. Whether they were her parents' killers or other travelers, she couldn't risk finding out. By the time she found the rock overhang and managed to start a fire using her father's flint and steel, also salvaged from his pocket during their last embrace, she was barely conscious. The rabbit had been a miracle, caught in a crude snare she'd fashioned after watching her father do the same on previous hunting trips. Now, as the Apache warrior stood watching her from the ridge, Eliza's mind flashed back to her mother's warnings about the native tribes. "They'll take your scalp as sure as looking at you," other travelers had cautioned at their last trading post. But something deeper told her that if the warrior had wanted her dead, she would be already. She had nothing of value, nothing to steal, except her life, and that it seemed was hanging by the thinnest of threads. Dawn broke with the promise of another scorching day. Eliza's mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton, her tongue swollen from thirst. The warrior had disappeared sometime during the night, while exhaustion claimed her. Perhaps he'd been a mirage, a figment of her dehydrated mind. She needed water. The canteen she'd filled from a muddy puddle 3 days ago was empty, and her urine had become dark and scant. Father's voice echoed in her memory from their journey preparations. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. She was approaching her limit. A mile away, she knew there was a dry creek bed that might contain moisture beneath the surface if she dug deep enough. Gathering her knife and the rabbit skin she'd clumsily cured, Eliza set out across the unforgiving landscape. The sun climbed higher as she walked, baking the earth and everything on it. Heat waves distorted the horizon, making the distant mountains dance. Twice she stumbled, her vision blurring. The third time she fell, her hands slammed against the ground, collecting a crop of painful cactus spines. By the time she reached the creek bed, her shadow had shrunk to a small puddle beneath her. The sandy bottom showed no signs of moisture, But Eliza knew better than to trust appearances in the desert. She began to dig first with a flat rock, then with her raw hands, when the rock proved too unwieldy. An hour passed. 2. The hole deepened to her elbow, then her shoulder. No water. Tears of frustration stung her eyes, but she couldn't afford to waste the moisture. She dug deeper. Finally, at the bottom of the hole, the sand darkened. Moisture. She scraped more frantically, ignoring the pain of her torn fingernails. A small pool began to form, muddy but precious. So focused was she on her task that she didn't hear them approach until a low growl made her freeze. 2 wild dogs stood 10 feet away, ribs protruding through mangy coats, yellow eyes, fixed on her with primal hunger. These weren't the friendly farm dogs she knew from home. These were desert scavengers, opportunistic killers. And she was wounded, weak, easy prey. Eliza slowly reached for her knife, keeping her movements minimal. The larger dog took a step forward, lips pulling back to reveal yellowed fangs. The smaller one began to circle around, cutting off her retreat. She grabbed a handful of sand, flung it at the larger dog's face, then scrambled to her feet. The animal yelped, but recovered quickly, advancing with renewed aggression. Eliza backed away, knife held out before her, knowing the thin blade would do little against 2 determined attackers. The circling dog lunged first, snapping at her leg. She slashed wildly with her knife, connecting with something, but not deterring the animal. The larger dog seized this distraction to charge. Eliza screamed, stumbling backward, knowing she couldn't fight both at once. A whistling sound cut the air. Something flashed past her ear so close she felt the breeze of its passage. The larger dog dropped instantly, a wooden shaft protruding from its throat, blood pulsing around the wound. The second dog froze, then turned and fled, vanishing into the scrubland with its tail tucked low. Heart-pounding, Eliza whirled toward the source of the projectile. There, standing 20 paces away, lowering a wooden throwing spear, was the Apache warrior from the night before. Sunlight gleamed off the bone breastplate he wore over a buckskin shirt. Dark eyes assessed her from beneath the shadow of his war bonnet. He stepped forward, retrieving his spear from the dead dog with a single fluid motion. Eliza clutched her knife tighter, backing away, until she stumbled over a rock and fell hard, the air knocked from her lungs. The warrior made no move to approach further. Instead, he pointed to her waterhole, then to his own water skin, and finally gestured toward his camp beyond the ridge. "The spring has better water," he said in clear accented English. "Your hole collects mud, not life." Eliza stared, uncomprehending. Was he offering help, or was this a trick to capture her? As if reading her thoughts, the warrior removed his bone knife from his belt and placed it deliberately on the ground between them, then stepped back, hands open at his sides. "I mean you no harm," he said. "Today you live. Tomorrow is uncertain." Still, she hesitated, torn between desperate need and ingrained fear. The warrior's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I am Chato," he said, touching his chest. "You?" Her voice, when it finally came, was a cracked whisper from a throat too long dry. "Eliza." Chato nodded once, then pointed again to the ridge. "Come, or stay. The choice is yours." With that, he turned and began walking away, leaving his knife on the ground, a gift or a test, she wasn't sure which. Eliza looked at the dead dog, then at her pathetic waterhole, then at her bleeding hands. Pride warred with survival instinct. Independence with necessity. Survival won. She picked up Chato's knife, tucked it alongside her own, and on trembling legs followed the warrior toward the unknown. Chato's camp nestled in a protected hollow between 2 red sandstone formations. A small fire burned in a ring of stones, beside which lay the skinned carcass of a jackrabbit, far plumper than the scraggly one Eliza had caught. The smell of cooking meat made her stomach clench painfully. As they approached, Eliza's steps grew more hesitant. Years of warnings about savage Indians echoed in her mind. Her parents hadn't shared the prejudices of many settlers. Father had even traded amicably with a group of Pueblo people they'd encountered. But the stories of captives taken of settlers scalped persisted in the collective fears of every wagon train. 10 feet from the camp, her nerve failed. She stopped swaying slightly, her body at war with itself. Hunger and thirst pulled her forward. Fear held her back. Chato continued to the fire without looking back. He squatted beside it, turning the spit that held the rabbit. Only when he'd checked the meat did he glance up at her, his expression neutral. "The water is there," he said, nodding toward a clay pot covered with a flat stone. Eliza remained frozen, her mind racing through desperate calculations. If she ran, where would she go? Back to her water hole to collect a few mouthfuls of muddy liquid, and then what she'd survived nearly 2 weeks in the desert. Through luck and desperation. But luck always ran out eventually. Chato sighed, seeming to understand her dilemma. He took a drink from the water pot himself, then set it down halfway between them. "It is not poisoned," he said simply. "No tricks." Still, she hesitated, her parched throat working reflexively at the sight of water. "Why," she finally managed to ask, "why help me?" Chato was silent for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice carried a weight beyond his words. "I had a sister," he said, his eyes growing distant, voice dropping to a whisper filled with old pain. "White men came, took her, sold her." His eyes, when they met Eliza's, contained a universe of sorrow. "She was your age." The revelation struck Eliza like physical blow. This warrior, this stranger, who had every reason to hate people who looked like her, was helping her because of his own loss, a mirror of her own. Her legs suddenly gave way, and she sank to her knees in the sand. The world spun around her, darkening at the edges. Dehydration, exhaustion, and emotional overload combined in a wave that threatened to pull her under. Through the encroaching darkness, she felt strong hands catch her before she hit the ground. Then water, blessed water, trickled between her cracked lips. She swallowed greedily, choking a little. "Slowly," Chato's voice commanded. "Small sips will save you. Gulps will drown you." When she could focus again, she found herself propped against a rock, the water pot in her hands. Chato had returned to the fire, deliberately giving her space. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded without looking at her, continuing his work with the rabbit. After a time, he offered her a portion speared on the tip of his knife. The meat was hot, juicy, perfectly cooked. She forced herself to eat slowly, though her stomach demanded she gulp it down. As twilight descended, a strange calm settled over Eliza. The immediate crisis of survival had eased, if only temporarily. Her mind, no longer consumed with finding the next sip of water or morsel of food, began to process the deeper realities of her situation. "My parents are dead," she said suddenly, the words falling from her mouth unbidden. "Men killed them, burned our wagon." She looked up at Chato, who watched her steadily across the fire. "They wanted to take me to Santa Fe, to sell me." Chato's face hardened. "Slavers still work these lands," he said. "Mexican law forbids, American law forbids, but desert has no law. Will they look for me?" The question that had been haunting her for days finally voiced aloud. Chato considered this. "Depends. If you're worth much to them, yes. If not..." He shrugged. "I heard them say someone in Santa Fe would pay for me, because of my hair." She touched her matted blonde locks self-consciously. "A man named Fairchild." Chato's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Fairchild." He repeated the name, clearly familiar to him, though he offered nothing more. "Do you know him?" Eliza pressed, heart racing at his reaction. "A wealthy man, a powerful man." Chato spoke carefully, as if weighing each word. "He trades in many things. Some say in flesh." The confirmation of her worst fears should have terrified Eliza, but instead it kindled something else. A spark of anger, small but hot, deep in her chest. "I won't let them take me," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. Chato studied her for a long moment, assessing. Then he reached into a leather pouch and withdrew something that glinted in the firelight, a small steel knife, with an antler handle far superior to both her salvaged blade and the one he'd left by the creek bed. He held it out to her handle first. To avoid captivity, you must gain strength. To gain strength, you must learn. Eliza hesitated, then took the knife, feeling its perfect balance in her palm. I want to learn, she said. Chato nodded once. Tomorrow we begin. That night, wrapped in a rabbit skin blanket Chato had provided, Eliza slept deeply for the first time since the attack. Her dreams were dark, but no longer formless. Now they contained a purpose, a direction. And when she woke to find Chato already up preparing for the day's lessons, she felt something she had thought lost forever in the flames of her family's wagon. Hope. For 7 weeks, Chato taught Eliza the ways of desert survival. Each morning began before dawn, when the air still held the night's coolness. The first week focused on water, how to find it, collect it, conserve it. Water is life. Chato explained on the 4th morning, leading her to a seemingly barren patch of ground. See these plants, small but deep roots. Where they grow, water hides beneath. He showed her how to dig properly, how to create solar stills using a piece of canvas and a container, how to collect morning dew from certain leaves and rocks. Most die in desert because they look for rivers, he said. Desert hides its water. Must learn its secrets. By the end of the 2nd week, Eliza's hands were raw, fingernails torn, palms covered in blisters that broke and reformed daily. Every muscle ached from digging, carrying, building. But she had not gone thirsty again. The 3rd week, they moved to food. Chato taught her which desert plants were edible prickly pear cactus, mesquite pods, yucca flowers. He showed her how to set snares for rabbits and ground squirrels, how to clean and cook the meat to preserve its moisture. Always save some, he instructed, showing her how to dry strips of rabbit into jerky. Today's hunger is not as important as tomorrow's strength. The first time Eliza caught nothing in her snares for 2 days straight, she broke down in tears of frustration. I'm doing it exactly as you showed me. She sobbed exhaustion and hunger, making her emotions volatile. What am I doing wrong? Instead of answering directly, Chato led her to her empty snares and pointed to subtle disturbances in the soil around them. You set them well, he acknowledged. But your scent is strong, your footprints many. Animals read these signs better than any man. Next time approach from downwind, touch nothing with bare hands. It was a pattern that repeated throughout her training. Initial instruction, attempts and failures, moments of despair, then refinement, adaptation, and eventually success. Chato never berated her for failures or praised her excessively for successes. He simply observed, corrected, and expected her to continue. By the 5th week, her hands had begun to toughen, small calluses forming where blisters had once been. Her fair skin had darkened under the relentless sun, though Chato had shown her how to make protective salves from yucca and other plants. The 6th week was devoted to shelter, how to choose safe locations, how to build structures that would protect from sun wind and the occasional violent desert storm. Rock face to north. Chato instructed as they constructed a more permanent shelter than the simple lean-to she'd been using. Winter winds come from north. Summer storms from southwest. During the 7th week, Eliza learned to start a fire using 3 different methods: flint and steel bow drill and fire piston. Her first attempts with the bow drill had been frustratingly unsuccessful, her skinny arms lacking the strength and stamina to maintain the necessary pressure and speed. I can't do it, she had admitted on the 3rd try, close to tears. Cannot or will not, Chato challenged. Big difference. My arms hurt, I'm not strong enough. It is not about strength, he corrected. It is about patience, about rhythm. He guided her hands, showing her how to use her body weight rather than muscle power alone. Find the song in the movement. By the 15th attempt, she had managed to create an ember. The sense of accomplishment had been greater than anything she'd ever felt. Throughout these weeks, they never stayed in one place for more than a few days. Chato explained that movement was essential both to follow food sources and to avoid those who might be looking for them. The men who attacked your family, he said one evening as they made camp in a new location, they work for someone dangerous. Fairchild. Eliza said the name still sending a chill through her, despite the weeks that had passed. Chato nodded grimly. William Fairchild is powerful in Santa Fe. Many friends. Many enemies, too. But what does he want with me? Eliza asked the question that had plagued her since the night of the attack. I'm nobody important. Chato's expression grew guarded. Every hunter has his reasons. Some hunt for food, some for sport. He poked the fire with a stick. Some hunt to fill emptiness inside. It wasn't a direct answer, and Eliza sensed he was withholding something. But before she could press further, Chato changed the subject, instructing her on the properties of various medicinal plants he'd gathered that day. The 8th week brought new lessons, defense and awareness. How to move silently, how to read animal tracks, how to recognize signs of human passage. Breath control, Chato emphasized as they practiced stalking techniques. Panic makes breath loud, heart loud. Calm breath, calm heart, silent movement. He taught her how to use the knife he'd given her, not just as a tool, but as a weapon. Proper grips, basic strikes, how to target vulnerable areas. Her 12-year-old arms could never match a grown man's strength, so Chato emphasized speed, precision, and the element of surprise. Fight only when no choice, he warned. Better to hide to run. But if cornered, he made a swift, decisive gesture with his own knife, then strike once, strike hard, and run again. On the morning of the 55th day, Eliza woke before dawn with a sense of restlessness. Their food supplies were adequate, but not abundant, and she had been practicing setting snares for small game. Without waking Chato, she decided to check her traps and perhaps gather some of the prickly pear fruits that were ripening on nearby cacti. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as she moved silently through the desert using the stalking techniques Chato had taught her. Her first 2 snares were empty, but the 3rd had caught a plump jackrabbit. She quickly dispatched it, as she had been taught swiftly with respect for the life that would sustain hers. As she reset the snare, a sound carried on the still morning air voices. Human voices speaking English. Instantly, Eliza dropped to the ground, pressing herself against the earth behind a clump of sagebrush. Her heart hammered so loudly, she feared it might be heard. But she forced her breathing to remain slow and controlled, just as Chato had instructed. The voices grew louder. 2 men, perhaps 3, approaching from the west. Moving carefully, Eliza crawled to a position where she could see without being seen. 3 riders came into view, moving slowly across the desert floor. They were rough-looking men with unkempt beards and dusty clothes. 2 wore wide-brimmed hats, pulled low against the coming sun. The 3rd had a red bandana tied around his head. All carried rifles. Eliza's blood ran cold. She couldn't be certain these were the same men who had attacked her family's wagon. She had glimpsed them only briefly in the chaos, but they matched the general description. And what were any men doing in this remote stretch of desert unless they were tracking someone? The men stopped about 50 yards from her hiding place. Red Bandana dismounted and knelt to study the ground. Trail's gone cold, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning stillness. Been near 2 months. Girl's likely dead by now. Boss won't like that, said one of the mounted men, a burly figure with a patchy beard and nervous eyes, who constantly scanned the horizon. He paid good money up front for this job, Dixon. You said it'd be easy pickings? Shut your trap, Jeb. Red Bandana Dixon snapped. Fairchild can go to hell. We got most of what he wanted from that wagon train. The girl was just extra profit. The third rider, a gaunt man with a scar across his cheek, spat into the dust. I told you we should have searched harder that night. Girl couldn't have got far on foot. His voice had a whining quality that set Eliza's teeth on edge. Something ain't natural about it. This whole territory's cursed, if you ask me. Apache spirits and whatnot. Nobody asked you, Tate. Dixon replied with contempt. And there ain't no spirits. There's men, there's beasts, and there's fools who don't know the difference. He remounted his horse. Let's sweep south another day. If we find nothing, we head back to Santa Fe. I ain't wasting more time on this wild goose chase. What about them Apache we saw signs of yesterday? Tate asked nervously, fingering a string of what looked like animal teeth around his neck. My pa always said, your pa was a drunk who died face down in a pig pen. Dixon cut him off. We're not here to hunt Apaches. They keep to themselves if you do the same. Now quit your belly aching and mount up. They rode off, continuing east, but angling south. Eliza remained frozen in her hiding place. Long after they disappeared from view, her mind racing with this new information. These were indeed the men who had murdered her parents. They were actively hunting her. And someone named Fairchild in Santa Fe had paid them to do it. Paid them specifically to capture her alive. But why she was nobody, just a stonemason's daughter from Missouri? What possible value could she have to a stranger in Santa Fe? With trembling hands, she gathered her rabbit and began the trek back to camp, constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of the riders returning. When she reached the safety of their hidden hollow, she found Chato awake and clearly concerned by her absence. "Where did you go?" He demanded, an edge to his voice she had never heard before. "To check my snares," she answered, holding up the rabbit as evidence. "But I saw men 3 riders. They were talking about me." Chato's expression darkened. "Tell me everything." Eliza recounted what she had seen and heard while Chato listened intently, his face revealing nothing. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "These men who attacked your family," he finally said. "Did you see their faces clearly?" Eliza shook her head. It was night. They wore bandanas over their faces. But one had a tattoo on his hand, a snake coiled around a cross. Chato's eyes narrowed. "You did not mention this before." "I didn't think it mattered," Eliza said, suddenly unsure. "Does it?" Instead of answering directly, Chato moved to his small pack and withdrew a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Eliza. It was a wanted poster, worn and creased from being carried for some time. The sketch showed a man with hard eyes and a cruel mouth. Beneath the image was printed, "Wanted Samuel Snake, Dixon for murder, kidnapping, theft, 500 reward, dead or alive." Identifying Mark Snake and cross tattoo on right hand. Eliza stared at the poster, then at Chato. "You knew all this time you knew who killed my parents." "I suspected." Chato corrected. "Dixon and his gang raid along the Santa Fe Trail. They take what they want, goods horses sometimes, people. But why me?" Eliza asked the question that had been burning in her mind since overhearing the riders. "Why would someone in Santa Fe pay to have me captured?" Chato's expression became grave. "There is something I must show you," he said. "Something I have kept hidden because I did not think you were ready to see it. But now you must know the truth." He went to his sleeping area and dug beneath his bedroll, withdrawing a small object wrapped in buckskin. When he unwrapped it and held it out to Eliza, she gasped. In his palm lay her mother's gold locket, the one that always hung around her neck, the one that contained miniature portraits of her grandparents. "How did you get this?" Eliza whispered, taking it with trembling fingers. "I found it near your campfire the first night I watched you," Chato explained. "I recognized what it was, and I recognized the faces inside." Eliza opened the locket, expecting to see the familiar portraits of her stern-faced grandfather and gentle grandmother. Instead, she found herself looking at different faces altogether. A handsome man with a neat beard and a beautiful woman with blonde hair much like her own. "These aren't my grandparents," she said, confused. "I don't understand." "The man is William Fairchild," Chato said quietly. The woman was his wife, Catherine. Eliza's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Fairchild, the same man who sent those men after me?" Chato nodded solemnly. "William Fairchild is the wealthiest man in Santa Fe. He owns half the businesses there. His wife died in childbirth 6 years ago along with their infant daughter. He was never the same after." A memory flashed in Eliza's mind, mother sitting by a campfire gently stroking the locket as she told bedtime stories. "My family had hopes for me once," she'd said wistfully, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Grand hopes. My sister married well-lived in a mansion with servants and fine things." When Eliza had asked what happened to her sister, mother had simply said, "Sometimes happiness comes at too high a price, sweetheart. But what does that have to do with me?" Eliza demanded, though. A terrible suspicion was beginning to form in her mind. "Your mother," Chato said gently. "Did she ever speak of her life before marrying your father?" Eliza thought back. Mother had always been reluctant to discuss her past, saying only that she'd had a falling out with her family back east before coming west and meeting father. "She said her parents died when she was young," Eliza said slowly. "That she was raised by relatives who were cruel to her. She ran away when she was 16. Your mother's name was Martha. Was that her birth name?" I don't know," Eliza admitted. "I think father called her Maddie sometimes." Chato pointed to the locket. "Look closely at the woman's face. Then think of your own mother's face." Eliza studied the portrait, and with a jolt of recognition saw what Chato meant. The woman in the locket had her mother's eyes, her mother's smile, though younger and more carefree than Eliza had ever seen her. "This can't be," she whispered. "Are you saying your mother was Catherine Fairchild's younger sister?" Chato confirmed. "She was Matilda Fairchild before she became Martha Turner." The revelation hit Eliza like a physical blow. "So, this man, William Fairchild, is my uncle." "Yes, and he has been searching for his sister-in-law for many years. When word reached him that a woman matching her description was traveling the Santa Fe Trail with her husband and blonde daughter, he sent Dixon to find you." "But why?" Eliza cried, her voice rising with panic and confusion. "Why kill my parents if he wanted to find us?" "Dixon is a man who kills for pleasure," Chato said grimly. "His orders may have been to bring all of you to Santa Fe, but he chose his own way." His eyes darkened further. "And that is not all. 6 years ago, after his wife died, Fairchild became unstable. He tried to force your mother to take her sister's place, not as his wife, but to raise his household to be the woman of the family. When she refused, he threatened to take what was precious to her." Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. "You were just a baby then. Your mother fled in the night, changed her name, married your father, who agreed to raise you as his own. Fairchild has been hunting ever since, his obsession growing with each passing year." Chato's voice hardened. "Now, having failed to capture you, Dixon must find you or face Fairchild's wrath." Eliza's mind reeled with the implications. Everything she thought she knew about her family had suddenly shifted. Her mother had been running from something or someone all along. The journey to Santa Fe hadn't been about father's prospects as a stonemason. It had been about mother's past catching up with her. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, her voice small and hurt. "Would you have believed me?" Chato countered. "A stranger telling you your mother had lied to you all your life, that your family was not who you thought they were." He shook his head. "You were not ready. Perhaps you are still not ready. But those men are hunting you, and you must understand why." Eliza clutched the locket tightly, her thoughts in turmoil. What does he want with me? This uncle I never knew I had. All that said, Chato is what we must discover. But not here, not now. Dixon and his men are too close. We must move tonight under cover of darkness. As they packed their few belongings and prepared to abandon the camp that had been Eliza's salvation, she felt as though the ground beneath her feet had vanished. The simple narrative of her life-loving parents' tragic lost struggle for survival had been replaced by something far more complex and frightening. Who was she, really? Why had her mother fled from her wealthy family? And what did William Fairchild want with his long-lost niece, enough to send killers to find her? The questions swirled in her mind, like the desert dust devils offering no answers, only deeper mystery. They traveled by night, moving southward through increasingly rugged terrain. Chato explained they were heading for Apache territory where Dixon and his men would be reluctant to follow. "My people control these mountains," he told Eliza as they picked their way through a narrow canyon. "White men who enter uninvited rarely leave." 4 nights of hard travel left Eliza exhausted, but stronger than she would have believed possible 2 months ago. Her body had adapted to the rigors of desert life, her muscles toned, her skin tanned, and weathered, her reflexes sharper. She moved with a quiet confidence that sometimes surprised even her. On the 5th day, they made camp in a hidden valley, nestled between towering red cliffs. A small spring provided fresh water, and the sheltered location meant they could risk a fire without the smoke being visible from a distance. As they ate a meal of roasted quail and wild onions, Eliza finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at her since Chato's revelation. "Why were you tracking Dixon?" she asked. "The wanted poster, you had it before you found me." Chato gazed into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I told you I had a sister who was taken by white men. What I did not tell you was that Dixon led those men." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "You've been hunting him," Eliza said softly. It wasn't a question. Chato nodded once. "For 3 summers, following his trail of blood across the territory, always one step behind." His dark eyes reflected the dancing flames. "Until I found you. And now you're helping me instead of continuing your hunt," Eliza said, understanding dawning. "You put aside your vengeance for my sake." "Not aside," Chato corrected. "Our paths now run together. Dixon hunts you, I hunt Dixon. The circle closes." The simplicity of his logic was undeniable. Yet Eliza sensed depths of pain and purpose in Chato that she could barely comprehend. His quest for vengeance had somehow transformed into a mission of protection, at least temporarily. "What was her name, your sister?" Eliza's voice was gentle, inviting confidence rather than demanding it. Nailin Chato said the word little more than a whisper. It means brave one in our language. His eyes grew distant, his voice softening with rare emotion. She laughed often. Even when life was hard, she found joy in small things, a bird's song the shape of a cloud, the color of sunset. He fell silent for a long moment before adding, "I still hear her laughter sometimes in the wind." The unexpected glimpse into Chato's heart touched Eliza deeply. She reached across the space between them, and for the first time placed her small hand on his weathered one. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything you've taught me. For saving my life." Chato acknowledged her gratitude with a slight nod, then rose to check the perimeter of their camp before settling down to sleep. The next morning, Eliza woke at first light. Chato was already up examining tracks at the edge of their camp. "Deer passed in the night," he reported. "And fox. Nothing else." They ate a light breakfast, then Chato outlined the day's lessons. "Today you learned to use bow," he said, producing a small bow clearly made for a child or young woman. "Not as loud as gun, more useful for hunting." The bow was beautifully crafted from desert ironwood, with a sinew string and delicate carvings along its length. Eliza admired it and looked questioningly at Chato. "I made it during nights while you slept," he explained. "It is yours now." Touched by the gift, Eliza spent the morning learning the basics of archery under Chato's patient instruction. By midday, she could consistently hit a target from 15 paces, not impressive by Apache standards, Chato informed her, but a solid beginning. "Go practice by spring," he directed after their noon meal. "I will scout ridgeline, make sure we are still alone." Eliza took her bow and a quiver of arrows to the small clearing by the spring where she had set up a target on a juniper trunk. The repetitive motion of knocking, drawing, and releasing arrows was oddly calming, allowing her mind to settle after days of emotional turmoil. She had just retrieved her arrows and was preparing for another round of practice when she heard the faint but unmistakable sound of a horse's snort. Freezing in place, Eliza scanned her surroundings. The spring lay in a depression with rocky slopes rising on 3 sides. Perfect for concealment, but also perfect for an ambush. She slowly reached for her knife, wishing she'd brought Chato's rifle instead of just the bow. Movement caught her eye, a flash of red among the rocks above. Red bandana. Her breath caught in her throat. Dixon. Keeping low, Eliza backed toward a cluster of boulders, trying to reach cover without being spotted. She'd almost made it when a voice called out, "Well, well, look what we found, boys." The little golden bird that flew away. Dixon stood atop a boulder 20 yards away, rifle aimed directly at her. His face matched the sketch on the wanted poster, lean and cruel with eyes like chips of ice. 2 more men flanked him, also armed, their horses tethered nearby. "No need to run, girl." Dixon continued, his voice almost friendly. "We ain't gonna hurt you. Got strict orders about that." His smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. "Your uncle's mighty anxious to meet you." Eliza's mind raced. Where was Chato? Had they found him, killed him? Or was he still scouting the ridge, unaware of the danger? "What did you do to my parents?" she demanded, buying time assessing options. Dixon's smile faded. "Now that was unfortunate business. Your pa shouldn't have pulled that rifle. Made things ugly fast." He spat to one side. "Your ma, though, that was Jeb's doing. Man's got a temper when he drinks." He nodded toward one of his companions, the burly man with the patchy beard. "Personally, I'd have preferred bringing all of you in alive. Bonus money that way. Mr. Fairchild's paying double if she ain't damaged." Jeb interjected, his eyes gleaming with avarice as he stared at Eliza. "Triple if we get her there before the month's end." "Shut your mouth about the arrangements," Dixon snapped. He turned his attention back to Eliza. "Come along quiet now, girl. Your uncle's been looking for you a long time." "He's not my uncle," Eliza said, her voice surprisingly steady. "He's a madman who sent killers after his own family." Dixon's eyebrows rose. "Is that what you think? Well, you've got part of it right." A malicious gleam entered his eyes. "Fairchild's obsessed, no doubt about that. But not with family, girl. With his dead wife." "What do you mean?" Eliza asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. "You're the spitting image of her." Dixon said, his voice dropping to a confidential tone as if sharing a secret. "Same hair, same eyes. Your uncle," he emphasized the word mockingly, "wants you because you look just like his precious Catherine. He wants a replacement for what he lost. A pretty little doll he can dress up and pretend is his dead wife come back to him." The words struck Eliza like physical blows. Could it be true? Was Fairchild so deranged that he would hunt down a child to serve as some grotesque substitute for his deceased spouse? "You're lying," she said, but doubt had taken root. "Am I?" Dixon laughed. "Ask your Apache friend. He knows. That's why he's been hiding you out here all these weeks." How did Dixon know about Chato? The question flashed through Eliza's mind, even as she heard a scuffling sound from the ridge above them. "Speaking of your protector," Dixon continued, nodding to his men. "Tate, go check on our friend. Make sure he's secure." The gaunt man with the scar, Tate hesitated. "You sure he can't get loose? Them Apache are slippery as—" He took a rifle butt to the head. Dixon cut him off. "He ain't going nowhere. Now go make sure or you'll join him." As Tate reluctantly moved toward the ridge, Eliza's heart plummeted. They had Chato. Somehow they'd found him first, ambushed him, while she was practicing her archery, blissfully unaware. Dixon turned his attention back to Eliza. "Now where were we?" "Oh yes, you were about to come along quiet-like." "I'd rather die," she said and meant it. "That's not one of your choices," Dixon replied coldly. "Jeb, grab her." The burly man started forward, a rope in his hands. Eliza backed toward the spring, mind racing. The vile quicksand, actually a deep mud pit with a deceptively solid crust, lay just beyond the water's edge. If she could lure Jeb into it— "Come here, you little hellcat," Jeb growled, advancing steadily. "I ain't got all day." Eliza continued, backing up, her expression deliberately fearful, her eyes wide and fixed on Jeb. Just a few more steps. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the direction of the ridge. Both Dixon and Jeb turned instinctively toward the sound. "Tate," Dixon called. "What the hell?" An arrow whistled through the air, striking Jeb in the shoulder. He howled in pain, staggering backward. A second arrow narrowly missed Dixon, who dove behind a boulder, cursing violently. From the ridge, a figure emerged. Chato blood streaming down one side of his face, but very much alive and free. He had Eliza's bow in his hands, already knocking another arrow. "Run," he shouted to her. "To the cave." Eliza didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the narrow ravine that led to the hidden cave they had discovered days earlier. Behind her, chaos erupted. Dixon was firing his rifle at Chato, who had disappeared from view after loosing another arrow. Jeb was bellowing in pain and rage, the arrow still protruding from his shoulder. She had almost reached the ravine when the ground in front of her exploded in a cloud of dust and rock fragments. Dixon had spotted her escape and redirected his fire. Another bullet whined past her ear, so close she felt the air disturbed by its passage. Diving into the ravine's entrance, Eliza scrambled over loose rocks and scrub brush, the sounds of the firefight fading behind her. The passage twisted between towering walls, offering temporary protection from bullets, but forcing her to follow a predictable path. She needed to reach the cave before Dixon and Jeb realized where she was headed. Emerging from the ravine into a broader section of canyon, Eliza spotted the cave entrance, little more than a crack in the cliff face, about 50 yards ahead. She sprinted toward it, legs pumping, lungs burning. Just as she reached the entrance, a figure stepped out from behind a boulder, blocking her path. Tate, his face bloody from what appeared to be claw marks across his cheek, his eyes wild with fear and anger. "Got you now," he wheezed, raising his knife. The string of animal teeth around his neck clicked together as he advanced. "Dixon'll skin me alive if I let you get away." Eliza skidded to a halt, frantically assessing her options. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Dixon and Jeb had figured out her destination and were following. In front of her, Tate blocked the cave entrance, his knife glinting in the sunlight. She was trapped. Then she remembered Chato's lessons. When cornered by a predator, become a predator yourself. With a yell that surprised even her, Eliza charged directly at Tate. The unexpected aggression from a 12-year-old girl momentarily confused him. In that split second of hesitation, Eliza dropped to her knees and slid in the dust, passing between his legs before he could grab her. She scrambled to her feet inside the cave entrance, whirling to face Tate as he lunged after her. Her hand found a fist-sized rock. She swung with all her strength, connecting with his temple. Tate collapsed with a grunt, his body blocking the narrow entrance partially enough to slow Dixon and Jeb, who were now visible at the mouth of the ravine. Eliza retreated deeper into the cave, her heart hammering against her ribs. The passage widened slightly, leading to a small chamber with a natural chimney that allowed dim light to filter in from above. There was no other exit. She was cornered, truly trapped now. But at least she had home ground advantage. And she had Chato's knife. Outside, she could hear Dixon and Jeb arguing. "Is he dead?" Dixon demanded. "Dunno." Jeb replied, his voice tight with pain from the arrow wound. "He ain't moving." "Drag him out of the way. The girl's in there, and I mean to have her." A moment later, Tate's unconscious form was pulled from the entrance. Dixon appeared in the opening, his rifle held ready. "Well, no more games, girl," he called into the dimness. "Come out now or I start shooting blind. Cave this small, I'm bound to hit you eventually." Eliza pressed herself against the rough wall, trying to control her ragged breathing. Her options were dwindling rapidly. Then she heard it, a faint scraping sound from above. Looking up at the chimney-like opening, she glimpsed movement. A moment later, a small object dropped silently to the cave floor near her feet. Chato's second knife. He was on the cliff above, somehow having worked his way around while Dixon and Jeb pursued her. The realization gave her a surge of hope. "Last chance." Dixon called, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Come out or I'm coming and shooting." Eliza picked up the knife, one in each hand now. "If you want me," she called back, her voice steadier than she felt. "Come and get me." Dixon laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "Brave little thing, aren't you? Your uncle will have fun breaking that spirit." "He's not my uncle," Eliza replied. "And he doesn't want me as family. He wants a replacement for his dead wife. That's what you said." "Did I?" Dixon's voice took on a mocking tone. "Well, maybe I lied. Or maybe he lied to me. Either way, you're worth a lot of money, girl. And I mean to collect." As he spoke, Dixon edged into the cave, rifle at the ready, eyes straining to adjust to the dimness after the bright desert sunlight. Behind him, Jeb stood guard at the entrance, his own weapon trained on the interior. Eliza tensed, ready to move. She would get only one chance. Dixon spotted her, a pale shape against the dark wall. He swung his rifle toward her, and that's when Chato dropped from the chimney above, landing directly on Dixon's back. The impact drove both men to the ground, and the rifle discharging harmlessly into the cave ceiling. Dust and rock fragments rained down as the two men grappled in the confined space. "Kill him!" Dixon shouted to Jeb as he struggled to free himself from Chato's grip. "Shoot the savage!" Jeb raised his rifle, trying to get a clear shot in the chaotic struggle. Eliza seized her moment. She launched herself at Jeb, both knives extended before her. One blade slashed across his gun hand, sending the weapon clattering to the ground. The other she drove into his already wounded shoulder. Jeb screamed, staggering backward out of the cave entrance. Eliza pursued, knowing she couldn't let him recover. He was still much stronger than her despite his wounds. Outside, the bright sunlight momentarily blinded her. She blinked rapidly, trying to locate Jeb. A heavy blow caught her across the temple, sending her sprawling in the dust. Her vision swam colored spots dancing before her eyes. "Ah, you little witch," Jeb snarled, looming over her. Blood soaked his shirt from the reopened arrow wound and the fresh knife cut. In his hand, he held a large rock. "Dixon wants you alive," but he didn't say nothing about unharmed. He raised the rock, ready to bring it down on her head. Eliza tried to roll away, but her limbs seemed unresponsive, her movements sluggish from the blow she'd taken. The rock began its downward arc and stopped abruptly as an arrow buried itself in Jeb's chest. He stood frozen for a moment, a look of profound surprise on his face. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed beside Eliza, the rock tumbling harmlessly from his nerveless fingers. Standing 20 yards away at the mouth of the ravine was a young Apache warrior. Behind him, 2 others appeared, all armed with bows. Reinforcements from Chato's tribe. Eliza struggled to her feet, her head pounding from Jeb's blow. Inside the cave, the sounds of struggle continued. Dixon and Chato were still fighting. She staggered toward the entrance, determined to help. As she reached the cave mouth, a gunshot echoed from within, deafeningly loud in the confined space. Her heart lurched painfully in her chest. "Miss Chato," she called, fear making her voice crack. For a terrible moment, there was only silence. Then a figure appeared in the entrance. Dixon, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, his clothes torn and dusty. In his hand was his revolver, its barrel smoking. "Your protector's done for." He panted, a savage grin splitting his face. "Now it's just you and me, girl." Eliza backed away, horror and grief welling up inside her. Chato couldn't be dead. Not after everything. Not when she still needed him. Dixon advanced, his eyes never leaving her face. "You've led me on quite a chase," he said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "Cost me 2 men, cost me time, cost me money." His expression hardened. Someone's going to pay for that, and it ain't gonna be me. Behind him, the 3 Apache warriors had moved closer, their arrows trained on Dixon's back. But they held their fire, clearly concerned about hitting Eliza if Dixon moved suddenly. "You won't get away with this," Eliza said, playing for time, praying for a miracle. "There are witnesses now." Dixon laughed. "Witnesses? You mean those savages?" He jerked his head toward the Apache without turning. "Who's going to believe them over a white man? That's if they live to tell the tale." His confidence was terrifying. This was a man who had killed countless times, who navigated a lawless territory with impunity. What chance did she have against someone like that? Then, movement in the cave entrance behind Dixon caught her eye. A familiar figure, bloody but alive, was slowly, silently emerging. Chato, somehow still conscious, despite what must have been a near miss from Dixon's revolver. Eliza knew she had to keep Dixon's attention focused on her. "Why does Fairchild want me?" she demanded. "Tell me the truth." Dixon cocked his head, studying her with clinical interest. Truth is a luxury out here, girl. But if you want it." He shrugged. Fairchild's mind broke when his wife died. He sees her in you, same hair, same eyes. Wants to keep you like a pet, a little doll he can pretend is Catherine reborn. His smile was vicious. "Won't that be a fine life, living with a madman who dresses you like his dead wife, who looks at you with hunger no uncle should feel for his niece?" The words were calculated to terrify, and they succeeded. A wave of revulsion swept through Eliza at the picture Dixon painted. "You're lying," she said, but doubt colored her voice. "Am I?" Dixon took another step toward her. "Ask your Apache friend." "Oh wait, you can't. He's dead, just like your parents, just like anyone who tries to keep you from your destiny." He was close enough now that Eliza could smell the tobacco on his breath, see the flecks of dried blood in his beard. His revolver was leveled at her midsection, his finger steady on the trigger. "Now you're going to come quiet," he said softly, "or I put a bullet in your leg and carry you screaming all the way to Santa Fe. Your choice." In that moment, Eliza saw her entire life distilled into this single terrible decision. Submit and face whatever twisted fate awaited her in Santa Fe, or resist and suffer immediately. Neither option offered hope. Then over Dixon's shoulder, she saw Chato raise his knife. Time seemed to slow. Eliza knew she had to distract Dixon for just a second longer. "I'll go with you," she said, her voice breaking. "Just, please don't hurt me." Dixon's face split in a triumphant grin. "Smart girl. I knew you'd—" Chato's knife plunged into Dixon's back with such force that the tip emerged from his chest. Dixon's eyes widened in shock, his sentence ending in a wet gurgle. The revolver discharged as his finger convulsed on the trigger, the bullet kicking up dust inches from Eliza's feet. For a suspended moment, Dixon remained upright, staring at Eliza with stunned disbelief. Then his legs buckled and he crumpled to the ground. Behind him stood Chato, swaying slightly, blood soaking the left side of his buckskin shirt. His face was a mask of pain, but his eyes burned with fierce satisfaction. "For Nayland," he said quietly, looking down at Dixon's body. "For your parents, for all who suffered by his hand." Eliza rushed forward as Chato's strength finally gave out. She caught him as he sank to his knees, supporting his weight as best she could. The Apache warriors hurried to help, easing Chato onto his back. "How badly are you hurt?" Eliza asked, fear making her voice tremble. Chato grimaced. "Bullet grazed my side. Not deep, but bleeds much." He looked up at her, his gaze clear despite the pain. "You fought well. I was scared," she admitted. "When I thought he'd killed you." "Fear is natural," Chato said. "Courage is fighting despite fear." His hand found hers, squeezing weakly. "You have courage, Eliza Turner." The warriors spoke rapidly to Chato in Apache, their expressions concerned. He replied briefly, then turned back to Eliza. "These are my cousins," he explained. "They came looking when I did not return as expected. Now they will help us reach our village." One of the warriors was examining Dixon's body, his expression grim. He called something to Chato, who nodded. "Dixon is dead," Chato translated. "As is the big one by the cave. The other still lives, but will not wake soon." Eliza looked at the bodies of the men who had destroyed her family, who had hunted her across the desert, who had nearly succeeded in delivering her to a fate too terrible to contemplate. She expected to feel triumph, or at least relief. Instead, she felt only a profound weariness. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Chato's eyes met hers, understanding in their depths. "Now you choose your path," he said. "But first we heal." The Apache village was a collection of dome-shaped wickiups, nestled in a protected valley 3 days' journey from the site of the confrontation with Dixon. Eliza and Chato were transported there on travois, pulled by the warriors' horses, both too injured to ride properly. Chato's wound proved more serious than he had initially admitted. The bullet had carved a deep furrow along his ribs, causing substantial blood loss. For the first 2 days in the village, he drifted in and out of consciousness as the medicine woman treated him with poultices and healing ceremonies. Eliza, suffering from the blow to her head, and exhaustion, was similarly confined to rest. But by the 3rd day, she was able to sit outside the wickiup assigned to her, observing the daily life of the Apache camp. Children played games in the central area, their laughter a balm to her battered spirit. Women worked at food preparation, weaving, and other crafts, occasionally glancing at her with curious but not unfriendly eyes. Men returned from hunting or scouting, bringing game or news to share with the community. It was Eliza realized a home, something she had thought lost forever in the flames of her family's wagon. On the 5th day, Chato was well enough to join her outside. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "The village council has met," Chato finally said. "They have decided what to do about the white man who still lives." Eliza remembered. In the chaos of the fight, she had almost forgotten him. "What will happen to him?" "He will be taken to the nearest settlement and left for the law there," Chato said, "with proof of his crimes." Eliza nodded slowly. It seemed just perhaps than she might have expected from people who had every reason to hate white settlers. "And me?" she asked. "What does the council say about me?" Chato studied her face for a moment. "They say you may stay, if that is your wish. You fought bravely against enemies of the Apache. You have earned a place here." The offer stunned her. To be accepted into the tribe, to have a home and a family again, it was more than she could have hoped for in the dark days after the attack. But there was still the matter of William Fairchild, the truth of her mother's past, the questions that remained unanswered. I need to know, she said finally. About Fairchild, about why my mother ran, about who I really am. Chato nodded, understanding in his eyes. The past shapes us, he said, but it does not own us. Remember that when you face this man. You think I should go to Santa Fe? I think you will never find peace until you do. They were quiet for a time, each lost in thought. Then Eliza asked the question that had been troubling her since Dixon's death. Do you think Dixon was telling the truth about Fairchild wanting me as a replacement for his wife? Chato considered this carefully. Dixon was a man of many lies, he said at last. But even liars sometimes speak truth, usually twisted to serve their purpose. He turned to face her directly. Trust your instincts when you meet this man. They have kept you alive so far. 2 weeks later, Eliza stood at the edge of the Apache camp prepared to depart. Her strength had returned, her resolve hardened by the knowledge that only by confronting her past could she truly claim her future. Chato approached, leading a small pinto mare. She is yours, he said, a gift from the tribe. Eliza ran her hand over the horse's sleek neck, touched beyond words. I can't take her, she protested weakly. She's too valuable. Her value is in carrying you safely, Chato replied. That is how she honors us. From his belt, Chato withdrew a familiar object, his knife, the one that had killed Dixon. He held it out to Eliza handle first. Take this also, he said. Remember what it taught you. Eliza accepted the knife, emotion tightening her throat. I can never repay you, she said. For all you've done. Repayment is not needed between family, Chato said simply. Then to her surprise, he added, I will join you in Santa Fe when my wound is fully healed. 1 moon from now at the trading post on the edge of town. You would do that? Eliza asked, surprised and touched. Chato nodded. Your path is dangerous still, and I have my own questions for this man Fairchild. His eyes hardened briefly. Questions about a girl named Naylan, sold 6 summers ago. Understanding dawned in Eliza. Fairchild's reach extended beyond her own family tragedy. If he truly dealt in human trafficking, as Dixon had implied, there might be a connection to Chato's sister's disappearance as well. 1 month, she agreed. I'll wait for you there. With that promise, Eliza mounted her new horse and rode toward the distant mountains beyond which lay Santa Fe and the answers she sought. The journey would be long and not without peril. But for the first time since her parents' death, she faced the future not with fear, but with determination. 6 weeks after parting from Chato, Eliza Turner rode slowly into Santa Fe. She had traveled cautiously, avoiding main trails and settlements where questions might be asked about a young girl riding alone. The clothes provided by the Apache women, a practical combination of buckskin and traded cotton fabric, helped disguise her age somewhat, as did the confident way she carried herself after months of wilderness survival. Her first stop was the site where her family's wagon had been attacked. Little remained of the tragedy-charred timbers, long since weathered, broken wheels half buried in sand, a few scattered metal fragments that had once been tools or cookware. She dismounted and stood in silence, the desert wind tugging at her clothes. The place held no terror for her now, only a deep, aching sadness. From her pocket, she withdrew 2 small wooden crosses she had carved herself. Carefully, she placed them in the sand and anchored them with stones. I found the truth, Mother, she said softly to the empty air. About you, about Fairchild, about why you ran. Her throat tightened with emotion. I understand now, and I forgive you for not telling me. You were trying to protect me just as you always did. She knelt beside the makeshift grave markers, tears finally flowing freely after months of stoic survival. I miss you both so much, every day. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But I'm doing well. I'm strong now. Stronger than I ever thought I could be. The simple ritual complete. Eliza stood and faced the distant spires of Santa Fe. I'm going to see him now, she said, as if her parents could hear. Not for revenge, not for money. Just for truth. For closure. She took a deep breath. And then I'm going to build something new. Something that would make you proud. With one last look at the crosses standing stark against the desert floor, Eliza mounted her horse and rode toward Santa Fe and the confrontation that awaited her there. The Fairchild mansion stood on a hill overlooking Santa Fe, its adobe walls gleaming golden in the afternoon sun. Eliza approached the wrought iron gates with outward calm, though her heart beat faster as she gave her name to the Mexican servant who answered her knock. Miss Turner to see Mr. Fairchild, she said clearly. He won't be expecting me. The servant's eyes widened slightly clearly. The name meant something to him. But he maintained his professional composure as he ushered her into a spacious courtyard filled with flowering plants and a burbling fountain. Wait here, please, he instructed before disappearing into the main house. Eliza stood by the fountain, noting the careful blend of Spanish Anglo and native influences in the estate's design. Wealth was evident in every detail, from the imported tiles to the exotic plantings, yet there was also taste and restraint in the overall effect. The servant returned quickly. Mr. Fairchild will see you immediately, he announced, leading her into the cool interior of the mansion. They passed through rooms furnished with an elegance Eliza had never encountered before. Fine carpets, polished furniture, oil paintings, and gilded frames. The display of wealth was impressive, yet somehow hollow, as if the spaces lacked the warmth of genuine habitation. At last, they reached a study where a man stood waiting, his back to the door as he gazed out a large window. At the sound of their entrance, he turned slowly. William Fairchild was tall and distinguished, his dark hair and beard showing threads of silver that added to his air of authority. His eyes, a piercing blue, much like Eliza's own, widened as they took in her appearance. Miss Turner, he said, his voice carefully controlled, despite the emotion evident in his face. I had begun to believe I would never meet you. The servant withdrew, closing the door quietly behind him. Eliza stood her ground, one hand resting near the knife concealed beneath her jacket, studying the man who had haunted her thoughts for months. Mr. Fairchild, she acknowledged with a slight nod. I believe you've gone to considerable trouble to arrange this meeting. A shadow crossed his face. What happened to your parents was never my intention. Samuel Dixon exceeded his orders in the most unforgivable way. Had I known his true nature? He broke off, visibly struggling for composure. Dixon is dead, Eliza said flatly, watching carefully for his reaction. I helped kill him myself. Surprise flickered across Fairchild's face, followed by something harder to define, respect perhaps, or concern. You've had quite a journey, it seems. A journey you forced upon me when you sent killers after my family. Eliza replied, anger flaring. Dixon told me why you want me. He said you see your dead wife in me, that you want me as her replacement. Fairchild flinched as if struck. That's not... He stopped, collected himself. Please sit. This conversation is long overdue, and there is much you don't understand. Eliza hesitated, then took a seat, maintaining her alertness. Fairchild poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter before joining her. Dixon was a monster who delighted in causing pain, he said quietly. Whatever he told you would have been calculated to frighten and disturb you. He met her gaze directly. I won't deny that you bear a striking resemblance to Catherine, my late wife, and your mother's sister. But my interest in finding you was never what Dixon implied. Then what was it? Eliza demanded. Why hunt us for years? Why not leave us in peace? Pain flashed across Fairchild's features. That's where you're wrong, my dear. Matilda, your mother, didn't leave because of a family quarrel. She left to protect you. The statement hung in the air between them, unexpected and puzzling. Protect me from what? Fairchild set his glass down carefully. From me, I suppose. Or rather, from what she feared I might become. He sighed heavily. I should start at the beginning. Your mother was Catherine's younger sister by 10 years. When Catherine and I married, Matilda was just 16. She lived with us here, continuing her education. He rose and walked to his desk, retrieving a framed photograph, which he handed to Eliza. It showed 3 people on the mansion's veranda: a younger William Fairchild, a beautiful woman, who must have been Catherine, and between them, a teenage girl, whose features unmistakably matched the mother Eliza remembered. Catherine and I were unable to have children for many years. Fairchild continued. It became a source of great sadness for both of us. Then, miraculously, Catherine conceived. We were overjoyed. His voice faltered, and he took a moment to collect himself. Complications arose during the delivery. Both Catherine and our infant daughter died within hours of each other. I was not well afterward. Grief consumed me. I made decisions, said things. He shook his head. Matilda witnessed my decline into obsession. What kind of obsession? Eliza asked, though she dreaded the answer. I became fixated on preserving Catherine's memory in every possible way. I kept her rooms exactly as she left them. I forbade anyone from touching her possessions. And His face darkened with shame. I began to see Catherine and Matilda. They were not identical, but there was a family resemblance. Fairchild's face darkened with the memory. I became controlling. I demanded she assume Catherine's social duties, manage the household as her sister had done. When she resisted, I threatened to use my influence against a young man. She had become fond of Thomas Hayes from the neighboring ranch. Shame filled his eyes. In my grief, I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone cruel. So she ran away. Eliza said, pieces falling into place. Fairchild nodded grimly. She left a letter explaining that my grief had become unhealthy, that I needed to face Catherine's death, rather than try to recreate her presence. She was right, of course, but I couldn't see it then. He met Eliza's eyes directly. What she didn't mention in the letter was that she was already 3 months pregnant. With you. The revelation struck Eliza like a physical blow. She never told me. I assumed my father was. James Turner was your father in every way that matters, Fairchild assured her quickly. He married your mother, knowing her condition, gave you his name, raised you as his own. By all accounts, he was a good, honorable man. Then Thomas Hayes was my biological father. Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. He died in a riding accident shortly after Matilda fled. She probably never knew. Fairchild's expression grew grave. After she left, I spiraled deeper into grief and obsession. I spent years searching for her, convinced that if I could just bring her back, something of Catherine would return with her. He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the mountains beyond. It took me a long time, too long, to recognize the damage I was causing. By the time I came to my senses and began searching for Matilda to make amends, she had disappeared completely, changed her name, married Turner, moved constantly. He turned back to face Eliza. When reports finally came that a woman matching her description was traveling with a fair-haired daughter toward Santa Fe, I saw it as providence. A chance to apologize, to make things right. So you hired Dixon. Eliza said, her voice hard. Another terrible mistake. Fairchild admitted genuine remorse in his expression. One I will regret until my dying day. Dixon came recommended as someone who could locate people in remote territories. I didn't investigate his background thoroughly enough. He leaned forward earnestly. When word reached me of what happened, I immediately disavowed him and added to the reward for his capture. I never intended harm to come to any of you. Eliza studied him carefully, weighing sincerity against potential manipulation. The story aligned with what she had pieced together over the months and differed significantly from Dixon's cruel insinuations. Yet this man's obsession, however much he claimed to have overcome it, had still led directly to her parents' deaths. "You said my mother left to protect me," she said, circling back to his earlier statement. "What did you mean?" Fairchild's expression grew troubled. "When Matilda realized she was pregnant, she feared I might try to take her child, you, and raise you as Catherine's daughter. Given my state of mind, then it wasn't an unreasonable fear." He shook his head. "I'd like to think I would never have gone that far, but the truth is, I was not in my right mind. Grief can transform a person, Eliza. Not always for the better." The admission was startling in its honesty. This wasn't a man denying his culpability or painting himself as blameless. This was someone acknowledging the darkness he had harbored, the damage he had done. "And now?" Eliza asked, searching his face. "What do you want from me now?" Nothing you don't freely wish to give," Fairchild replied. "I would understand completely if you walked out that door and never looked back." He hesitated. "But if you're willing, I'd like the chance to know you as yourself, not as a connection to the past. My home and resources are at your disposal for as long as you wish." The offer was generous, sincere, and complicated by the history between them. Eliza considered it carefully before responding. "There's something else I need to ask you," she said. "About a young Apache girl named Nayland, sold into captivity 6 years ago." Fairchild's brow furrowed in confusion. "I know nothing of such a girl," he said. "Why do you ask?" "Her brother believes there may be a connection to you," Eliza explained, watching him closely for any sign of deception. "Dixon was involved in her abduction." Understanding dawned in Fairchild's eyes. "Dixon was involved in many despicable enterprises beyond his work for me," he said grimly. "Including, I learned too late, trafficking in human beings. But I had no knowledge or part in such activities." He moved to his desk and withdrew a ledger. "These are records of all my business dealings for the past decade. You're welcome to examine them to confirm what I say." The offer seemed genuine. Either Fairchild was being truthful, or he was very confident in his ability to hide any incriminating evidence. Eliza decided to reserve judgment until Chato could investigate further. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Fairchild, but I've made my own plans." From her small traveling bag, she withdrew a folded document and handed it to him. Fairchild opened it with a questioning glance, then read it with growing surprise. "A business license, Turner and Associates Guides and Outfitters." Eliza nodded. "The American West is changing rapidly. Settlers, miners, businessmen, they all need reliable guides who know the terrain, the dangers, the native peoples. My partner and I will provide that service." "Your partner?" "The brother of the girl I mentioned. He taught me how to survive when I had nothing. Together we can navigate both worlds." She didn't elaborate further on Chato, who was due to arrive in Santa Fe within days. Their partnership was unusual, an Apache warrior and a young white woman. But their combined knowledge and skills were unmatched in the territories. Fairchild studied the document thoughtfully, an ambitious venture especially for someone so young. "I'm not as young as I look," Eliza said quietly. The desert and its harsh lessons had aged her far beyond her years. "And no, I don't suppose you are." Fairchild carefully refolded the license and returned it to her. "I won't presume to offer unsolicited advice on your business, but should you ever need capital for expansion or connections with potential clients." The offer hung in the air, neither rejected nor accepted. It was, Eliza realized, as close to a proper beginning as they were likely to manage a tentative bridge across the chasm of their complicated history. "I'll keep that in mind," she acknowledged. Rising from her chair, she added, "I should go." Fairchild stood as well, maintaining a respectful distance. "Might I write to you occasionally? Perhaps visit someday when you're established?" Eliza considered this. The anger and confusion that had driven her to Santa Fe had largely dissipated in the face of Fairchild's evident remorse and the fuller understanding of her mother's choices. What remained was a cautious openness to possibility. "You may write," she conceded. "As for visiting, we'll see." It was neither forgiveness nor rejection, simply the honest response of someone who had learned to take life one careful step at a time. As she prepared to leave, Fairchild moved to his desk and unlocked a small drawer. From it, he withdrew a velvet pouch. "This belonged to your mother," he said, offering it to Eliza. "She left it behind when she fled. I've kept it all these years, hoping to return it someday." Inside the pouch was a simple silver bracelet adorned with small turquoise stones. Eliza recognized it immediately. From her childhood, Mother had often spoken wistfully of a bracelet she'd lost during their travels, one her sister had given her for her 16th birthday. "She missed this," Eliza said softly, running her fingers over the smooth stones. "Thank you." The gift was a tangible connection to her mother's earlier life, to the young woman Matilda had been before becoming Martha Turner. It completed a circle somehow bridging past and present in a way Eliza hadn't realized she needed. Slipping the bracelet onto her wrist, she offered Fairchild her hand. He took it gently, the formal handshake gradually softening into something more human, an acknowledgement of shared loss and tentative new beginnings. "Safe travels, Eliza Turner," he said as she turned to leave. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become." The words followed her as she walked out of the mansion and back into the bustling streets of Santa Fe. They felt true somehow, a benediction she hadn't known she was seeking. 3 days later, Eliza waited at the trading post on the outskirts of Santa Fe, scanning the horizon for any sign of Chato. They had agreed to meet when the moon was full tonight, but she had come early, too restless to remain in the small room she'd rented in town. As the afternoon waned, a familiar figure appeared on the trail from the east, a rider on a painted horse, his posture unmistakable even at a distance. Eliza's heart lifted at the sight. She had wondered in her darker moments if he would come at all, if perhaps their paths had diverged for good after Dixon's death. Chato dismounted as he reached the trading post, his movements fluid and strong. The wound that had nearly taken his life had healed well, it seemed. He wore buckskins paired with a white settler's shirt, his long hair tied back neatly. To casual observers, he might have appeared to be one of the many native scouts who worked for stage companies or the army. But Eliza recognized the unchanged essence of the man who had saved her life and taught her to survive. "You came," she said simply, unable to hide her pleasure. "I said I would," he replied with equal directness. He studied her face carefully. "You found your answers in Santa Fe." "More than I expected," Eliza acknowledged. She held up her wrist, showing the turquoise bracelet. "And a piece of my mother's past." Chato nodded, understanding the significance without needing explanation. "Good. The past shapes us, but does not own us. Did you learn anything about your sister?" she asked, lowering her voice, though no one was near enough to overhear. A shadow crossed Chato's face. "Fairchild appears innocent of that crime," he said reluctantly. "My inquiries led elsewhere to a trader in Taos who deals in flesh. That trail is cold, but not dead. One day I will follow it." "We will follow it," Eliza corrected gently. "Partners, remember." The barest hint of a smile touched Chato's lips. "Partners," he agreed, as the sun began to set. Casting long shadows across the dusty landscape, Eliza shared what she had learned from Fairchild. Chato listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. "Do you believe him?" he asked when she had finished. Eliza considered this. "I think I do," she said finally. "Not because I trust him completely, but because his story makes sense of everything else I know." And he seemed genuinely remorseful. "Remorse does not undo harm," Chato observed. Eliza agreed. "But it can be the beginning of healing." They were quiet for a time, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in hues of gold and crimson. Then Chato spoke, his voice low and resonant in the gathering dusk. "Our first clients await in Silver City," he informed her. "Mining company needs safe passage through Mescalero territory. 3-day journey, dangerous country." "When do we leave?" Eliza asked, already mentally cataloging the supplies they would need. "At dawn," Chato replied, "if you are ready." She touched the knife at her belt, his gift symbol of all he had taught her. Then the bracelet on her wrist, her mother's legacy reminder of where she came from. Finally, the business license in her pocket, her future waiting to unfold. "I'm ready," she said with quiet confidence. As night fell, they made camp beneath the vast star-filled sky. Tomorrow they would begin their first official assignment as guides and outfitters. The path ahead would not be easy. The territories were still wild dangers, abundant prejudices deep-rooted on all sides. But they had skills few others possessed, knowledge that bridged two worlds, and a partnership forged in the crucible of survival. The orphan girl had learned not just to survive in the desert, but to thrive in its harsh embrace. And with each step forward, she moved further from the ashes of her past and closer to the future she was building on her own terms. Behind them, the moon rose full and bright over the eternal sands. Ahead lay challenge, purpose, possibility. And for the first time since smoke had filled her family's wagon, Eliza Turner felt truly, completely free.